The evidence is the problem of, well, what do we know about Entebbe? Like, what do we know about this place? Well, we kind of don't know much at all. Can you tell us about the how you gathered intelligence and information about Entebbe?
First of all, we should understand some information stand on Wednesday, like the hostages who released and flew back to Paris. We sent in investigators to ask them many questions, and some of them they remember and they wrote on paper and on their hand an important information. What is the situation in Entebbe? Some wrote how many terrorists they knew there were. It wasn't everyone not remember exactly the same number, but it gives some idea how many terrorists, how many Ugandan soldiers was more difficult to understand because many of the Ugandans, they were outside the room and not in the room. So it was difficult to understand exactly how big the Ugandan force were. So it was another source of understanding, you know, how big the Ugandan force and what happened. One of the interesting things that Israel sent on Friday morning a Mossad agent with a small aircraft who flew from Nairobi to Entebbe. And as they arrived above the airport, Entebbe airport, he told the Ugandan that he had a problem with the aircraft and he must land. And first they insisted him for landing in Entebbe, but then they told him, okay, you can land in Entebbe. And then he said, I can't. I have to you know, solve the problem. And he did a few circles around the airport and took quite a lot of pictures, which arrived to Israel on Friday afternoon until developed and brought into the Prime Minister table. It was a very important, again, it was important information to understand the situation, to know if there is a big change in the airport, if the Ugandan brought a big number of soldiers to the airport, and to see if there is truck, if there is a cars, if there is an anti-aircraft, you know, rocket or guns. So many things was important information to understand the situation in a real time in Entebbe. And again, it's something could change all the time. It could be a change. So it's not something that you can clear in 100%. So that was another source of information, which, you know, it's a Israeli chutzpah, you know.
It is chutzpah. There's no question about that. It's very big chutzpah.
The other source was we got the blueprint of the building, which built by Israeli company. So we get some information. But again, many things could change in a building. It was unused building and might be they broke walls or whatever. Who knows? And the other aspect we try to understand is the question if there is bomb on the main doors. And one of the hostages, a French colonel, a Jewish French colonel, answered. They put a camouflage bomb on the doors, but the carton box, it's empty. There is no bomb on the door. So that was a very important information for us to understand. I would like to add one thing on that. Some of them told a different information. And you should create a plan, how big the force, how many terrorists and how many Ugandan fought there.
Yeah.
But it wasn't clear that everyone, what he remember, it's the right answer. It's what he remember, what he saw. So it's always change the plan. Sometimes the number run between 50 to 100. So it's, of course, make all the force that we should bring over in a different way to calculate how big force we should bring over to Entebbe.
Well, that's a very big difference too between 50 and 100 men. And to give some further contextual information to the listeners, this was an amazing raid, as we know, and it's in fact, I think it's not far to say it's one of the most amazing special forces raids in human history. But not long before that, there had been an effort to release some hostages at a school that had gone bad. So people have got this idea that they kind of looked at that raid and went, "Oh yeah, of course it was gonna be good. It was always gonna happen that way. Wow, that's so amazing." It's like, no, there is a degree of luck, but the planning and the thought and the people at the time having to do the job, thinking on the spot and fixing problems. It's just so amazing what happened. It must have played in your head and the heads of the planners about the unfortunate situation at the school before. Like, did that affect the way that you think? Did that affect the way you guys planned? Did that affect the way you guys felt about your confidence levels?
Since felt the catastrophe on the trying to release school students from northern city in Israel, we took more seriously to develop ourselves, on how to fight with terrorists. And we were in the middle of trying to understand what is the best way to fight. There is no one answer, of course, but to develop different techniques and to understand how to work differently, mostly to understand by fighting against terrorists, it's not by fighting against army. It's a different, totally different. Fighting against terrorists, it's always mix of civilian with terrorists, and you should be very careful. You got a very little information, so many things could change. You should be clarified, or you should be ready to improvise the situation, to know what to do. So one of the good things on our unit, that we were a very small unit, we knew each other, and we did many things together. So we don't need very many words to understand the situation. And we knew how to work together, but independently at the same time. It was easy for us to develop the system, how to fight, how to come into the room or whatever could be building from a different direction at the same time. It's not something simple, but because we were very young, and unfortunately, we found ourselves quite often fighting against terrorists, we understood that is a best way. And the most always run by fighting against terrorists is a surprise, how to be the first one who opened fire. So, because that is a critical point, you never know. If they recognize you before, it's not good situation for the hostages. So we should try to be the first one to fight. And with a very little information in a very short time for doing something. So it's all together brought us that We were a small unit. We understood each other.
Yeah.
And we developed ourselves by catastrophe, by felt, by study what we did good and what should be improved.
I'm really interested in the mindset of, I was in the police for a short time. I was just a normal uniform officer. I didn't do any of the special things.
No,
but
that's sometimes the most important.
Oh, thank you. But like, I understand what it's like to go into a situation, because with policing, like, there's never, I mean, you have an outcome. It's like, yeah, I want to get here. I want to, arrest the offender, or I want to get the lady out of the house if it's a domestic violence situation. I want to do this. But you don't know anything about, like, you don't know what's in the house. You don't know what's in the, like, you don't know if the woman is going to be on your side. Maybe, you don't know what's around the corner. You don't know how many people are there. You don't know any of those things. So when I look at what happened in Entebbe, it's seriously, and I don't say this lightly, Major, like, what you guys achieved there is absolutely amazing when you think of every single problem that was kind of overcome. So the next problem, like, we've covered off on, okay, so you got a degree of understanding of the routine of the terrorists from speaking to the hostages that were released. You had some idea, but not complete idea, of the geography. You had a little bit of an idea of some of the troops there, but again, not much. Is there 50? Is there 100? We don't know. You don't even know how many men you need to take. I mean, wow, that's chutzpah. Like you said, that's a lot of chutzpah going on there. But then you have to get,
when you're on the next town, Entebbe town, there is a Ugandan army base, so they could bring extra force in case something getting difficulties.
Oh, and they could have had armor there. They could have had anything. Like, you know what I mean? It could have had a tank. God alone knows. All right, so the decision. So you've got this information, and then you have to travel 5,000 kilometers. So, and you got to get all this equipment, and you've made a decision. It's like, okay, we're going to do it this way. And again, that's a big deal. So you thought, okay, we're going to do this. And can you outline basically for the listeners, because, well, actually, no, we'll get into that in the tactical side. So we're going to do this, but then you have to get everybody from Israel to Entebbe without being seen. And you got to fly over the Red Sea or fly over Africa, and there's radar everywhere. What did you do? Like, how did you overcome that problem?
Look, the most important on that part, I will talk in metaphor. The bus driver take you from one station to another, and you sit on a bus. You're not really interested what is the bus driver do. It is responsibility to take us from one station to another. So that part wasn't on our end. It was on the Air Force end. We have to understand, the pilots, the Air Force, they were really heroes of the operation, because they took us in a very difficulty, much more difficulty than us. For us, what's a different to go to a hotel in Tel Aviv or to old terminal in Entebbe? It's away from Israel. It's a fighting against terrorists. It's not something that. But the question: who brought us to Entebbe? Who crossed all the 4,000 kilometers in a secret way? So that is the most important. We should bring all the light towards the pilots and the Air Force who prepared the plan. Wasn't any mechanical problem on the Hercules. So that is the most important part of transportation from Tel Aviv to Entebbe. And we should put all the focus on that. The bus driver and the bus company, they did the best.
But look, they were amazing. And my understanding is they developed specific technology to be able to land at night and all of this. There was radar that they invented to be able to land because it was a night raid. Maybe the lights of the airport, maybe the lights of the runway aren't going to be on. How many hours were you in the plane though, Major? How many hours was the flight?
How many hours we were on the air from Tel Aviv to Entebbe?
Yes.
It's about 9 hours with a stopover for about an hour and some minutes in Sharm el-Sheikh, the most airbase at that time. So it's about 9 hours we were on the air.
Okay, so that's in a Hercules with no air conditioning, no seats, no nothing. You're really low. Mate, you must have been like getting airsick and throwing up, and there's nowhere to sit, right? There's nowhere to sit.
We couldn't do anything on that. The people who work hardly were the pilots and the navigator and the mechanic and all of that. They were very busy on that 9 hours. We were, wasn't easy flight, but apart from that, we couldn't do anything. We just wait. We hardly understood where we were. It was dark part of the flight, and we couldn't see anything. Just the pilot sometime said on the speakers where we were. So that sort of situation of unknowing how that looked like Entebbe, unknowing the route and the bad condition, that is the most important part, which is different between the pilot and us, all the 180 soldiers from a different brigade and our unit. So it was long hours of being on unknown. And being in unknown, it's not only the question of fighting. That always, we don't know the result, but unknown for that long on a road is different. You don't know where the bus goes. You know the last station, but what is the route?
Yeah. We're going to turn up and have to shoot some people. But okay, so the plane lands and you're in Entebbe. So the plane's got on the ground, and you've been in this plane for 9 hours. I think it would almost be like, okay, no one likes to fight and risk their lives, but it's like, oh God, I want to get off this plane. Was it like that? Was it, I just want to get off this plane?
It's a mixed feeling, I can say. The first, personally, to go out from the plane, I wait for that moment. And went out for fighting, but went out for an uncomfortable situation. Just to be out from the plane, not to go and fighting with the terrorists and all this. So it's a mix. You want to end this uncomfortable, very difficult, you are in a box without knowing what's around, bad condition, storm and many things. So that's one thing. I remember very clear the moment we went out from the plane when we were already on the ground in Entebbe, and I was very much enjoyed first to be out.
Just happy.
Fresh air, the beautiful night, good weather, and quiet. That was a fantastic moment. And the difficulty on that is the transformation. It's changed so dramatically of being on the plane for that long, and 2 minutes after, you have a different world and enjoyed the world. It wasn't a world that you're going to fight now. But then, in some minutes, it's transformed again when we met Ugandan soldiers on the road. So it's a very quick transformation of the situation. I'm talking on myself, but I hear many people, they said similar things. Everyone described it in his word, the transformation from one situation to another, which was sometimes very dramatic.
Yeah. So, I mean, so the planes landed, the ramps have gone down, and basically, if you could just tell our listeners really quickly what the plan was and then how you executed it. So you have to get, obviously, there's about 2 kilometers from where the plane lands. You've got to get from where the plane lands across the runways, across the taxiways, across everything else, and there's soldiers there. Then you've got to get to the place where the hostages are. Can you talk us through that and what the plan was?
Yes.
Like, because obviously you guys had planned it before you got there. So how you were going to do that?
So we developed a system how to fight these terrorists that we divided to a small team, and each team has a duty what to do. We studied the building, hope what we knew. At the end, it's more or less the same what we knew. We studied the situation, and the 6 teams should work independently, but to understand that there is another 5 teams around which could open fire in case they see the hostages or Ugandan soldiers, not the hostages, sorry, the terrorists. So that's one important thing. 6 teams working together, and for a short time, either we succeed or fail.
Mhm.
You never know. And failed, it's a question of how many casualties you got. That's a question of failed. How many? The other aspect which we should understand, because we work on dark at night, middle of the night, we should recognize each other, that who is enemy and who is friend.
Yeah.
And that divided for 2 groups. First, between us, so we put a white hat on our head so we can recognize each other. Because we could be in a room or other room or around the building, and everyone at the night look similar. Soldier with gun. Remember, we were with the Ugandan uniform. So for how to divide for someone to understand that we are not Ugandan, but Israeli army. So we put a white hat on our head. So it's helped. But the other aspect of that, to know who is enemy and who is friend, it's a question about the hostages. We thought how they could react, that we cross into the room in the middle of the night could be a big chaos. It's a normal. People try to escape from a crossing fire.
Yeah.
It's not something, we thought maybe one soldier took a megaphone and told in different language that we are Israeli. But partly because it was short time, we didn't know how they will react on that.
Yeah.
We didn't know what they will do as we cross into the room. Some of them tried to escape, and unfortunately, 2 hostages killed by one of the soldiers. He thought they are terrorists. And I'm not blaming it. I think it's a normal thing. You never know. It's a question of decision, a decision which should take in a second to understand either enemy or a friend. So it's a very unusual situation, and on a faraway land in Entebbe. So you can't bring extra force in case will be some difficulties. You can't bring force. you should be ready
Yeah.
to do the job. The only force that we could bring is other brigade soldiers from Ugandan and Entebbe. So we knew there is some help from others, Israeli force, but everything was so quick.
Yeah. Yep. So getting from the I got to say, I'm getting, because I've been in situations like that where I've never been in a hostage thing like that, but I've been in situations where there are offenders guarding people. So, well, you're not getting there. These people are not going. And it's like, yeah, they are. So I have an understanding of what it's like and the tension, and just thinking about it makes me, takes me back to some of those jobs that I went to. And I don't understand exactly, because your level was right up here, but I have some understanding of what it's like. But getting from the planes, obviously, so these planes have landed, and that's amazing. All right. So just getting the planes on the ground is amazing. It's nighttime. Thank God the plane got on the ground. Like that's a big deal. The second thing is, okay, we got to get from the plane to the area. Like, what plan did you guys have to do that? Like, I understand there was a black Mercedes involved. Could you tell us?
Yes.
Could you tell us what the plan was to get?
By fighting against terrorists, the question of being the first one who opened fire, it's a critical point. It's a critical one, to be the first one. And so we always thought to ourselves how to surprise, how to be the first one who opened fire.
Yep.
Because that is the key for success. It's not mean we success always, but at least we knew that the surprise, it's a key. And after a long debate, what is a way to surprise the terrorists and the Ugandans, we decide to come down as Idi Amin arrived at the middle of the night to see the hostages. We knew from the hostages who released that almost every day he arrived to the airport to talk with the hostages. So we prepared a black Mercedes and always came with the 2 Jeep as soldiers who guard him. And we went out from the plane, 33 soldiers. On the front was black Mercedes and behind 2 Jeep. And we drove toward the terminal to meet the unknown situation over there in the middle of the night.
So that's kind of cool. And Idi Amin is an important character in this. He's actually one of the most important players. My understanding is that there was a former, that he was actually good friends with an Israeli officer. Can you tell us about the relationship between Idi Amin and this Israeli officer, the things that this officer tried to do to resolve the situation before this, and the phone call that he had with Idi? Could you mind telling us about that?
I would like to share my thought about Idi Amin.
Yeah.
Idi Amin, he was a character in one way. He was a dictator in the other way. He was a president of Uganda at the time. Idi Amin and Israel had a very warm relation between 68 till 72. In 4 years, as a chief of staff of the Ugandan army, he became a president of Uganda. And in that 4 years, he was very many times visited Israel. He had a private plane, and 2 Israeli pilots took him in all different parts of the routes he flew out from Uganda. And Israel sent at that 4 years many soldiers, officer, pilot to develop the Ugandan army. Israel sent Israeli company to develop the country on a civilian level. And it looked like a good future between the two countries. Like many other countries, it wasn't only Uganda. At the 60s and the 70s, Israel tried to put their hand in Africa countries to get some political support on the conflict that Israel faced all the time on the closest countries. And at that time, two things happened. First, a civil war opened in Uganda. And Idi Amin fought against the rebels who built a base in Tanzania. And he, at the same time, started to suffer from schizophrenia, from bipolar disease. And we can see at the same time a president of country, sovereign countries, which reacts on normal situation.
Yeah.
And slowly, two personality, which was part of one man, took a very unusual decision. And it was difficult for the West, for England, for America, for French, to understand what he wanted. And Israel was involved in that. Because on one hand, Israel and Idi Amin developed a good relation, a very warm relation. But at the same time, it wasn't clear his way of making decisions. Mm-hmm. And Israel decided not to send help on a civil war. And one of the decisions that he made, probably he prepared that before, but I have no idea or evidence of that. And as Israel said that she's not sending an Air Force plan, a jet fighter plan to Uganda, he told the Israeli officer, pilot, and company to leave the country immediately. And in 10 days, two things happened. No Israeli citizens and soldiers, they were on the ground on Entebbe. And in 10 days, he transferred himself from being part of the West countries to the Russian side of supporter. And he got, MiGs, the Russian jet fighter plane, and he got oil and weapons from Russia through Libya. So that sort of decision he could create very much because, in my understanding, in his behavior as a suffering from schizophrenia. Idi Amin ended his life in 2003 in mental hospital in Saudi Arabia. So we can see not a person, not a dictator only. We can see a person which reacts in two different ways. Sometimes it looks unusual. And the question, what you want to achieve, still open on myself. I have thought about it, but I'm not sure that I know exactly what you want to achieve in that week. Why you open his country for a terror attack, which arrived on French plane, wasn't against Israeli clear, but it was Israeli Jews of the plane. So it's unclear situation in what way he reacts to the situation.
And what did again, because the people were speaking to him, so what was he offered to resolve the situation? So like they said to him, maybe we can get you something like a Nobel, like is there something we can get you? Like what was he offered? That's an amazing part of this story.
I think personally, and I read about it and tried to understand him, when I was soldiers officer, I wasn't involved on this question. Just when
Yeah.
I'm getting
Yeah.
old and distant, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
I think he tried to achieve a better reaction from the West. The West blame him a lot. And he wants to put himself on a situation when he is a mediator between the terrorists and Israel and France. So he could, in one hand, open his country to a terror attack, which easily we can stand on understanding is devil part of his personality.
Yeah.
While at the same time, he wants to solve the problem in a peaceful situation. That is the other part of his personality. No one Ugandan soldiers touched any of the hostages. So what we want to achieve, it's still open question on me, but I can see two different roads at the same time. He is not only the dictator. No doubt, he was a dictator and killed easily, his people and other people, and Dora Bloch, as he understood that with success, so his force took her from the hospital in Kampala and she was murdered. No doubt about it, that he is a very, murder person.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at the same time, he wants to achieve. And he asks a few times the hostages to write a letter to the Israeli government by promise them, if you write a letter to the government, probably the government accepts the negotiation road and not a military action. And many times he arrived to see the hostages. He came with the Ugandan TV staff and he satellited outside Uganda to show that he's talking with the people and asked them to write a letter. And he is an honest man on the way that he show out to the world. So it's by that information, we are thought as to surprise the Ugandan and the terrorists would be good by coming down in the middle of the night as Idi Amin arrived to visit the hostages.
So you've turned up there, and that's amazing context. And I think maybe Idi wanted a Nobel Peace Prize or something like this. I don't know. Maybe God knows he wants something like that.
Could be.
But okay. So you've turned up there. This black Mercedes that pretending to be Idi Amin's convoy has gone across. You've got to the terminal. Again, that's amazing. That's really good. All these things seem simple, but it's like, oh no, it's not. It's like, okay, first we got here, then we got to get to there, then we got to. So the team storms the they go into where the hostages are, and there are some terrorists there. Were you with that team? Like, what was your specific role? Like, what team were you in?
I was one of the 16. My team duty was to be outside the building to be sure there is no extra force, Ugandan, either terrorists who come from the back. If there is fire outside the building, to react to that. That was my duty team was.
Okay, so you're on the perimeter, holding the perimeter. Okay, I understand.
Yes.
So, and it went bad. Like, there was a firefight there. Can you tell us about the firefight? Because, the Ugandans started shooting at you guys. And, you had to protect yourselves and the hostages. Like, how did that go?
The first thing, what I can say, it is a surprise. We stopped the car on the front doors, on the side of the control tower, and no one went out to welcome Idi Amin, so-called. Cars arrived as Idi Amin arrived, but no one went out to welcome him. It's quite surprised.
Yeah.
we stopped the cars and it was quiet. Just as we went out from the cars, very heavy fire opened from the control tower, which was built beside the building. And that was quite surprised. Nobody thought it's going to happen. And my team, tried to stop the fire while the other soldiers ran into the building and to the second floor where the Ugandan rest. And, you know, from that on, it's a history. In 5-7 minutes, everything ends, you know. That's what usually it's a very short fighting.
Yeah.
When the many terrorists and Ugandan soldiers they killed, and only when the extra force, which arrived by the other Hercules, they came with the light armor cars, they stopped the fire from the control tower. So it was a very, you know, intense moment of running from one step to another, of trying to be sure that we succeed. And you never know. It's a time when the commander wounded and the other one, deputy, took power and now is controlled. And you have to realize that in a very short time, something happened, and you should react to that. So the first, I took Yoni Netanyahu to the medical plan and back, you know, one jeep on the middle of the night in the middle of the airport, a big airport. So many things happen, and it's not something that you know exactly, you know, as a plan and what to do and how to move. You have to improvise and to know what's next. You see very short time ahead. What's next?
So my understanding is, so the team, so you're holding the perimeter, team has gone in, got the hostages, killed the terrorists, and any Ugandan soldiers that are in there. You guys are holding the perimeter under heavy fire, incidentally. The commander has been shot and wounded. He's been taken to back to the because a number of planes landed, taken back to the medical plane, and you guys are holding the perimeter. Okay, well that's pretty hard. So when you get everybody together in the dark, how did you how did you know that you had all the hostages, and B, where all of your soldiers were? Like, you don't want to leave anyone behind. Like, were there any problems with that?
First of all, it's a ethic question. It was sure for us, we are not going to leave the airport with everyone being on the plane. So that's first of all, we build up ourselves. We grow in the army with that situation. We are not leaving anyone behind. And even though it was away from Israel, many things could happen, but that is, first of all, the philosophy of being in a small team, being with a friend who could hit it, and you never know. And the first, we went out with the hostages, brought them to the plane, and it took quite a while. We lost some minutes to understand that one hostages missed. We knew the number of hostages from Israel and from the world and the air crew with Michel Bakos, the captain. And we knew one miss till we understood it was Dora Bloch, who took day before on Friday to hospital because she swallowed a fish bone. So that's one aspect. And the other aspect was to be sure that all the soldiers with us. And we missed some minutes by miscalculation. It was a mistake. And we thought that maybe one of the soldiers hit it somewhere. middle of the night, airport, darkness, fighting very easily. You never know if you run to somewhere or hit it by someone. So we missed some minutes before we took off on the last plane. So that other aspect of bringing everything and every soldiers back home safely. Of course, life, but even though dead, unfortunately, only one officer was killed. So that was very important part, the understanding of values. It's not only a question of action, it's a bring out question of values, different values of the operation. That's why, in my eyes, so many different groups around the world, Jews, Israelis, Christians, their interests, because the story is still relevant for today. The story still touch and put light on the different values of human being. And people want to understand values in their life by stories, not by a philosophy talk, by stories. It touch emotionally values of life. One of them is what you asked, will not leave anyone behind.
And that's, I got to say, and I really want to talk about the amazing French captain as well, but we'll just stay on the tactical side. We'll stay on the tactical side now. So, mate, it's good. You know, everything's gone okay so far. Like this amazing 5,000 kilometer trip just above the sea at just above the sea level on the Red Sea. Although you're sick as a dog in the plane, you're throwing up. It's so uncomfortable. The planes land. Again, that's amazing. Get the planes on the ground. Get the men and the cars there. Get the hostages out. Fantastic. Get the hostages in the plane. We've counted. Okay, we're going home. But there's a problem still because there are MiG jets on the ground, yeah? And those MiG jets are a lot faster, I'm thinking, than the Hercules. What did you guys have to do with the MiG jets? What did you do for them?
As the other force arrived with the Hercules number 2 and 3, one team drove towards the Ugandan airbase and rocketed and blow up the 11 MiGs, which they got from Libya. We're afraid that they might follow us on the earth when we flew out from Entebbe. At the end, later, we understood that they haven't got ability to take off at night and to fight. But that sort of information we couldn't get in that short time. So we rocket and blow up the Ugandan Air Force before we left Uganda. Yes.
All right. So now can you tell us about the French plane captain and what you think about him and your relationship with him? Because you became friends with the captain of the aircraft. Tell us his name and your feelings.
I would like to put some light. One of them is Captain Bakosh. The other one is another important man, Bruce Mackenzie. Why I mentioned these two people, there is many aspects to look at on them, but the most important for me to share is you and with your people who will read the article. That operation happened with a lot of involvement of Christian people. It wasn't only involvement of Israel and Jews and Uganda. It was a Christian who support Israel in many different ways till today. And Bruce Mackenzie is valued as a Christian man. as a pilot who fought against the Nazi during the Second World War. His decision, and together with all the air crew, 12 people, they decided to stay, some people said with the passengers, as the captain not leave the boat, but the last one. But I think he was more than that. He decided to stay with the Jews hostages, to understand that that is one value, again, for us as the Israeli Jews, as the Jews around the world. We are not alone. There is people who support and understand us, understand the situation that Israel try to be part of the democratic world, but at the same time fighting for existence, and sometimes do a mistake, sometimes kill civilians, but always fighting for existence of people there, of Jews. And his decision to stay, I think, left us with a very important message for the future's life. Sometimes values, different values, especially when we talk about life and death, it's more important than a personal interest. And the history of a human being, there is a few people who decided to follow this road. And especially today, when the life very much, painted by the one word, I. What is my interest? What is the most important? It's I. To look at that sometimes you're not thinking about yourself. You sit on a bus again, we talk about bus, and an old lady walk in. Do you stand up from a chair or not? It's a question. It's a small things, but a big example.
Yeah.
Do you stood up and give to the old lady the chair, or you said, maybe there is chair at the back, I have a seat, I'm tired, I would like to go as quick as possible from the bus? Who cares? Maybe she can wait to another bus. Many things, it's not a big issue only. It's not a question of life and death. It's a question of value of life.
That's so
as
true.
a human being. As a human being, what is important?
Yeah. We can't all be on raids. So we can't all be on raids in Entebbe saving hostages, but we can all stand for a lady in a bus. And that's so true, Major. That's just, I think you've nailed it 100% with that. I agree completely with that idea. That's so important.
It's a daily conflict of every human being. It's not a question of Jewish people. It's not a question of Ugandan people, or it's a human being question. Unfortunately, today, we develop ourselves to set a stage where I become the most important part of decision.
Mm.
I am.
Yeah. We can't live like that.
And that's why I think he left us with a very important message. The other person is Bruce Mackenzie. He was a Christian man, which stood of supporting the state of Israel.
Yeah.
As a Christians who standing support the Jews who have a right to have a country like any other people around the world. And thanks God, there is so many Christians around the world who standing and said, look, the Jews is not the devil on the world.
Yeah.
They have a right to live, to stand. And his decision, together with his friends, he wasn't only one, but he was a very important man to prepare Nairobi as a back base for the operation, was one of the important part of the mission, which helped the government of Israel to say, yes, we'll take the risk. To understand there is a back base, Nairobi.
And what happened to Bruce?
Yeah, that's what I share now. Unfortunately, 2 years after, in a very sad situation, he was murdered by Idi Amin. Idi Amin understood how much he was involved, and he paid his life for the success of the operation and to help Israel to standing for some years on the front line of bringing the truth of life, fighting against terrorism.
Mm.
Today, the world, in many cases, understands the terrorist more than the victim. The world explains why a terrorist group do of what they do, and not ask them one question: what is the right of terrorists to kill civilians?
Mm.
Like us, like you and me. What is the right of terrorists? Even though I support a political side of what they want to achieve, they haven't got a right to kill civilians.
Yeah.
By want to achieve a political goals.
Mm.
And the world today, mostly the West, mix up. They are bringing out so many beautiful words to understand people who kill civilians.
Yeah. Exactly. The world is upside down. It's so true. Tell us about the pilot of the airliner. My understanding is he agreed to stay with the hostages. Is that true? And how did that come about? Like, did all of the air crew stay? Was it just the captain? What happened?
All the French air crew decided to stay with the hostages because they decided they have a chance to leave Uganda and Entebbe on Wednesday evening, when the French government sent to plan to take all the non-Jews hostages out from Entebbe, and he, together with the 12th crew, decided to stay with the hostages. That's what I try to explain. His decision, it's not personally only. Personally, that we should remember him, his decision, but the message that he left for us, for the future life, especially for the young generation. Look, sometimes you should think about other people, not about yourself all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
I think that's why the story of Entebbe is so attractive around the world, even though it's 47 years after, still it touches values from a different aspect. And people want to touch values, to face and answer to themselves what is important in life.
So my understanding,
part of the human society.
Yeah, absolutely. My understanding is you ended up being friends with Captain Bucco. Is that true?
For many years, I wasn't. I met him once, I think, on the till we reached the 40 years anniversary. But since I was asking I don't know by whom, my life changed in the last 7 years when I was mostly around the world. And mostly I study things. I met people. People ask questions in the front of me. So we became friends, became a good friend. And till today with his wife and his two sons. And, life brought me to be in Nice, in his city in France, when he died, 95 years old. And I found myself in 2 days talking in the Central Cathedral of Nice and saying one word, thank you, Michel, of what you did and what you left for many parts of the society, from the hostages, the children of the hostages, and for every human being on the earth that can look what you left, I told there in my words. Sometimes values is more important. So I think his decision is still alive. That's the most. And his relation with Israel, he became a very strong relation of the captain of the Hercules who took him from Entebbe to Israel. And they became a very, very warm and strong relation. They become a very strong relation with the Israeli soldiers who were quadriplegic since the operation, wounded seriously. And they become a good friend. So he and his wife, Ingrid, they are very special people. And I always remember that. And I was lucky that we met years before he passed away, and I have a chance to sit with him hours in Nice, in his beautiful house. I came specially to meet him. I knew that he is not in a good situation, and I flew specially to meet him.
Wow. That is more than a little bit cool. But look, we've heard about this amazing raid, about all the amazing problems that you guys overcame. Now tell us about you. Like, who are your parents? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a family which, from both sides, my father and my mother's side, they were Holocaust survivors. They passed away already. For my mother's side, no one alive except her. And from my father's side, only one sister alive. She was in Auschwitz. And then after the war, they arrived, her family went down to Melbourne. And I had a family in Melbourne, in Australia, away from Israel, away from Europe, where what they thought, she and her husband shared with me, to be away from the possibility of having war. And Australia, it's a safe country. Hardly possible to have a war, especially so down Melbourne. And I grew up at the same time in a kibbutz, which was very much, standing on the Soviet Union philosophy, communist philosophy. So in many aspects, and I grew up in the third aspect of my life, I grew up in the very beginning of the independence of Israel, 48. Was the year when Israel got independence and fought against 7 countries, and we lost so many soldiers out for a very small number of Jews who were in Eretz Israel at that time. And I was born in 53, only 5 years after. And the country is still fighting for existing in many different aspects. So these 3 aspects very much paint my life. It brought me to one aspect, to join the elite unit, was part of the atmosphere in Israel here when I achieved the age of 18. At the same time, understanding the meaning of existence, creating a state of Israel as a place for the Jews, especially after the Second World War.
Yeah.
But at the same time, standing on value, humanitarian, know that there is always other aspect in life, which makes the taste of life in a good way or in a bad way.
Yeah.
It's our choice to choose what fruit to put in our mouth. And these two people, my parents, I'm so thankful for them. They taught me not only to fight for the existing of the state, and not only to standing on the communist philosophy, but to be humanitarian. Our house was open to Arabs in many cases. And I'm always try to think how not to hate anyone, but to look the good things of human being.
Wow.
And to create the positive view of human being, and to understand that lately, just in the last years of my life, when I was out of Israel, to understand that there is so many good things on Judaism, of being Jew, even though I'm secular, but it's not mean that to be a Jewish secular, it's mean something bad that is confronted word. I'm a Jew. There is so many important values to stand on.
Wow.
And that's what I did in the last 7 years.
Wow.
Study, meet with different people, and share myself and my view and my experience on a very important part of what my parents gave me.
Wow. Okay. I swear this is the absolute last question. How did the raid change you as a person? So, you know, you're back in the plane, you've just done this amazing thing. You're sitting in the Hercules, the noise is there. You're looking at your friends, you're looking at the hostages. What did you feel? Like, how did it change you? Like, it just must have been amazing.
There is a few aspects, but I would like to put one aspect to try to answer this question. I think one of the important parts, which sometimes bring difficulties to understand, that we are in Israel as a citizen of Israel. We are, as a Jew, we are not people who are fighting, killing, push away other people's rights. We are not basically standing on that. I become more humanistic Jew. And I understand very clear from Entebbe raid. We flew to Entebbe to save life of people, innocent people. Unfortunately, by saving other people, you should fight. And we killed terrorists, we killed Ugandan soldiers. My good friend, Yoni Netanyahu, we worked together for 1 year. He was killed on the fighting. But basically, things, we are not fighting for killing. We are not fighting for try to kill others. We want, and that is other part of myself, I understood that to come out from the Holocaust, you should survive in this world. This world is not always a place of I'm not naive, let's say, that's the word. But fighting for existence, it's not fighting for killing. It's a totally different.
Yeah.
Israel called to their army IDF, Israeli Defense Force. We are not always trying but to defend our right to be on the earth, to have a state. like any other people on the world, to have a right for having state. And I think, and that came later, and you asked me what I changed. I think in many aspects, the value of Jews brought this word to my mouth. I didn't know that before. I didn't know. What did that mean? The Jew is a sort of people who are not fighters. They're fighting for existing, but the Jews is group of people, very small number, but their shelf of books of Judaism in all different aspects brought to the world such a beautiful aspect.
Yep.
And the Jewish brain created technology which supply in so many good ways to the world to create a better life.
Mm.
That is part of being Jew. I don't have to standing on the center of Eiffel and shouting this. That is a daily work. We are standing on values. We try to create better life, but to exist.
Mm.
That's what I got out from Entebbe. The good things of being Jew, a citizen of Islam, and part for everyone else, part of humanitarian world.
I think that's an amazing concept, Major. Just the concept of existing is a statement in and of itself. And then existing to do something, like there is a point to existence. It's about values. It's about, like you said before, not, do you stand up for the old woman in the bus? Like, not everyone is going to free people from in raids in Entebbe, but everybody can stand for a bus, an old woman in a bus.
Right.
That's a very, honestly, that's
right.
and you exist to do that, and you do that, you're fulfilling your existence. You make your existence worthwhile. That's why God put us here, that's, wow. Thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule for talking to me today. I do actually have more questions, but I promised that would be the last one. So I'll let you go.